Good evening and welcome to the September 12th, 2024 School Committee meeting. Everyone in the studio, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there anyone here for public comment? Doesn't look like it. Thank you. Any recognitions tonight?
I think we'll just recognize that we have Savannah with us.
Hi everyone.
Welcome.
Yep.
Savannah
She's
Rivera,
our
nice
student
to
rep
meet
from
you.
the high school.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I would like to recognize that the other night at the Select Board, Susan Rothermick and Carol Kavanaugh for the fantastic presentation to the Select Board and other committees on our school budget and the impact on creating an inclusive school environment for our vulnerable learners. I really appreciated that. Thank you. Okay, and then we're ready for your report, Savannah, from
Okay.
Student Council.
So, hi everyone. My name is Savannah Rivera. I am a senior at HHS, and I'm really excited and grateful that I get to be here. So, thank you for having me. To start off, the Unite leaders and Ms. Carner put together a great freshman orientation on Wednesday before school started. Freshmen and seniors got their photos taken, whereas sophomores and juniors took theirs during school last week. And there was a small club fair outside the school where freshmen had the opportunity to get involved in the after-school community. They were also given a rundown of where their classes are, and with a brother in 9th grade, I can confirm that they only got lost once or twice. Moving forward to the senior events, we tie-dyed shirts for the first day of school, and while I can't promise they're pretty, that in addition to the senior sunrise really brought our class together. We had a great turnout at senior sunrise. People brought grills, they were making kebabs and pancakes, and we also had donuts. We recently had a successful fire drill, and everyone got out of the school to their designated areas efficiently and safely. We also recently had our club fair during lunch block, which showcased the 50-plus clubs at HHS, and I can tell you for Craft Club, we had a lot of new signups, so we're excited to get started with that. Something I'm really proud of at HHS is the variety and diversity of our clubs here, and there's always going to be a club, if not more than one, that will pique your interest and really help the underclassmen specifically get involved and make connections to the Hiller community. I would also like to thank all the teachers and faculty members who take time outside of their academic day to serve as advisors for these clubs and activities. Going into sports, we have a lot of junior leadership on our teams with junior captains in boys soccer and girls field hockey, who have played a crucial role both on and off the field. Girls volleyball has been dominating their start of the season, and the boys and girls cross-country teams have placed 5th and 7th at the MSTCA state relays. And also a huge shout out to Riley Colleran for her first career goal on the varsity girls soccer team this week. Additionally, we had our first student council meeting last Tuesday where we discussed upcoming events such as pep rally, homecoming, and the girls football game. To wrap up, I would like to mention what's going to be happening between now and the 26th. We have our first home football game next Friday, which always have big turnouts, and we're really excited to get back into that student section. And finally, during flex blocks, both this week and next week, freshmen and seniors will be meeting with their counselors for seminars, discussing adjusting to the first year of high school and post-secondary planning for the seniors. So again, thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to giving you the student perspective on things discussed here during school committee.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What's the girls volleyball record now?
I believe they won their first game that they played, but I haven't been following how many games they played since
Okay,
then.
excellent.
There's also a girls varsity soccer game happening right now, so check the score on that.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. Superintendent's report?
Sure. So tonight I just want to re-present my budgeting report from Tuesday evening. Sometimes I think that we just get different audiences, so I'm going to scoot through this. One thing you will also notice is that as we go through the budget season, Mrs. Rothermick and I will make very similar presentations very many times. So we are in the preliminary stages of budgeting this year, and one of the things that the Select Board very often asks us to do is kind of give them some foreshadowing of where our big budget drivers will be. So I like to start with the historical increases over time from FY20 to FY25, so you can see where we've been over the last 6 years. 6.3%, 6.6%, 5.4, 2.88, 7.9, and 5.35. And because there's just such variability in those numbers, you can see that we really do try to ask for the need-to-haves. We are predicting that there will be 3 major budget drivers this year. Student enrollment obviously drives the budget, special education needs, and then contractual obligations. So we'll start out with a look at our enrollment. What you're seeing on the screen is the table that was created for us by our demographer, Dr. Arthur Wagman. In the 24-25 school year, you can see that we are predicted to reach 4,290 students by the time we get to June of this year. And so if today we're at 4,234, we're about 56 students away from getting to that 4,290. And I know people say, well, 56 students seems like a lot, but over the year, from September to June, we very often reach that 50 student mark.
Is there an average that you have of, from this point to the end, the average number of students that kind of?
I don't, so you'll see on a subsequent slide that I put in the October sims and then the June sims, so you can see kind of how we've grown from October to June.
Okay.
But lots of times we do get, kids who come in September who,
Leave.
or they were, well, no, they were like on vacation and they came in 3 days late, or they were moving to Hopkinton but didn't get here till September 14th, or, those kinds of things. So you still get some trickling in September. August is a very busy month, as you would expect. So when we are building the FY26 budget, we're building it on this number right here, 4,355, which is what we are predicted to reach by June of 2026. So it seems unusual that in September of 24, you're looking at June of 26, but we are. So here's the slide, Susan, that I was talking about. In 18-19, for example, our projected enrollment was 3,557. In October of that year, we were actually tracking about 130 students ahead. So in October, we had 3,685, and that grew to 3,741. Those were years where we had big increases in students. So if we wanted to just look at last year, for example, in October of 23, we had 4,187, and in June of 24, we had 4,237, which is exactly 50 kids. If you look at where we are right now, our projected enrollment is 4,290. We haven't had our October sims numbers come in yet, so we can watch that number as well as where we are at the end of the year.
What does SIMS stand for?
Oh, I think it's like Student Information Management System. I think that's what it is.
I was wondering the same thing.
And when we say sims, I think that that's an acronym that DESE puts out there.
Yeah.
So everybody has their SIMS report, and every kid gets a SACID, which is their student identity number. And that's how we track them forever.
Wasn't Sims once a family for?
It was a game.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. It's like, okay.
I talk about this in my day job, so it's fun to come here and do the discussion
more
about
about it.
Sims.
More Sims.
All right, so given the fact that we're at about 4,246, and we're predicting that in June of 2026, we'll be going to 4,355. When we plan this budget, we're planning it around about 110 students. And so what we like to do is we take our students and we group them into 20s. Because we've got about 20 kids in a classroom, and those 20 kids would need about 1.4 teachers to service them. So when we take those groups of 20, you can see that we have 5.5 groups of 20, and if we multiply that times the 1.4 teachers for each set of 20 students, we're looking at about 7.7 FTEs. We always estimate that we're going to hire teachers at about $75,000. Sometimes you hire them at 60, sometimes you hire them at 90, but 75 is not a bad estimate there. So when we look at the 7.7 FTEs and we multiply that times the 75,000, we're talking about 5,700 $577,500.
Question.
Yes.
Have you taken into account potential retirements in that?
Oh, we always consider that. And that's, part of the balancing of the budget. You imagine how many people will retire, and you can kind of base that on previous years. And
So your 7 is kind of like, that takes in replacing retired teachers and then adding?
well, these 7.7 are brand new.
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
That's,
But yes, we'll have people retire and we'll have people join us. And sometimes
Right.
the people who join you at a lower salary than someone who's
Exactly.
been teaching in the district for 32 years.
right.
So let's take a look at special education. The special education numbers have certainly increased from 2020 to 2024. In this particular table, DESE offers us the numbers for 2024. You'll see on the next slide that they don't offer us the numbers yet for 2024. In 2020, we had 3,893 students, and in 2024, we had 4,223 students, an increase of 330 kids over a 5-year period. And so if we take this number, the 4,223, and we say that it used to be in 2020, that we had 12.2% of our kids on IEPs, which went to 12.1, which went to 12.4, which went to 13.5, and now it has arrived at 14.2%. You can see that that percentage has crept up as well. So we have 330 more kids, and we have 2% more on IEPs. So I've gone a very long way to say that we have kids who have more kids who have needs. And so what has happened in terms of staffing over the last several years, and again, this only goes to 2023, is that in 2019, we had 10 FTE special educators for every 100 students with disabilities. So when we had 10 teachers for every 100 kids, the ratio of teacher to student was about 10 students. That number of FTEs per 100 students has dipped. And so it went to 8.4, 9.3, 8.8, and when we were in FY23, or in the 23 school year, that number went down to 7.3, and we realized that could no longer sustain. In FY25, we have added 3 special education FTEs, 2 at the middle school, 1 at the high school. So when we start to get when we get the 24 numbers and the 25 numbers, hopefully this is going to creep back up to a place where our kids' ratios are much better in terms of special educators and numbers of children on IEPs. Nevertheless, when we look at those numbers, we really don't know where they will land until we see that 24 data. And so we will be looking at that 24 data as well as programmatic needs to make sure that our special education staffing is ample. The town does sort of refill every year our special education stabilization account. The dollar amount in there is $1,094,000. And I guess just given the fact that we've seen such inflation over the past several years, and we know we have more kids, that we should be very careful to note that that $1,094,000 may not have as much buying power as it has had in the past.
Could you explain what the special education stabilization account is?
Sure, so communities can set one up if they want. They have to have a vote of the school board and a vote of the select board to do that. And typically what they use that money for is if you have out-of-district placements that were unanticipated and the number creeps up kind of rapidly, you want to make sure that you have a way to fund those. So it's anticipated that money will go back into our stabilization account. Last year, we did not use all of it. There was about $50,000 left.
Thank you.
And then we should take a look at contractual obligations. This will be a tricky year for budgeting because we are negotiating with the custodians, the teachers, and the nurses. We just finished negotiations with our paraprofessionals. And so in addition to not knowing what those cost of living increases will be or whatever their percent increase is, we use both terms for that, we also have to remember that our teachers are entitled to step raises, which means that if they've been here 5 years and they're on step 5, when they go into year 6, they'll move to step 6. So they get an increase in terms of steps, and they also get an increase in terms of lanes if you increase your degree status. So if I had a master's degree and I earned 15 credits beyond my master's degree, I would move from the master's lane to the master's plus 15 lane. And so we have to figure all of that out. The salary increases for the operating budget in FY '25 was 2.5, but when we looked at all of our contractual obligations, so anyone that we have a contract with, so for example, one of the big ones is the school buses. We have a contract with Conley Busing. The contract obligations for all of those things was 3.07%. That, of course, is just contracts. It doesn't mean that we've paid the electric light bill or any of those kinds of things. All right, so just doing a little bit of math, every time we talk about a percentage, we're talking about $631,000. We know absolutely that you are going to see 3 FTE special education paraprofessionals in the FY '26 budget because we've already hired them now. And so they're working with us now in the FY '25 year, so they will definitely appear in the FY '26 budget. All right, so where does that leave us? The initial data indicate that we will have 3.0 special education paraprofessionals. The teacher staffing will be somewhere around that 7.7% that we talked about, just to cover our enrollment increases. There could be other special education needs, you know, that we left that one kind of hanging because we've added some special educators, but we don't know what the programmatic and the student IEP demands will be. And then we are also trying to incrementally grow our administrative team. When we show you the increases in students, and I think I've been here, this is the start of my 9th year, we've had more than 800 students join our schools. And other than one additional assistant principal at the Hopkins School, we really have not increased our building administrators. We may have increased directors, we may have added a director of equity and access, but we have not increased our building leadership. And it's just getting really unwieldy with that many students and so few building level administrators. And then, of course, you'll see contractual obligations, which are salary and other obligations. So we will just start meeting with our principals and directors in the coming couple of weeks. And what we always ask them to do is to make sure that they have data to support all of their asks, to consider the needs of all of our children, and to make sure that they are focused on the needs to have and not the nice to haves. Those are really important things. We will be giving this presentation on Tuesday morning at our admin council meeting so that all of the administrators are in one room hearing the same message at the same time. All right, and then finally, I love to show this slide. I show it all the time. The per pupil expenditure. On the top row going across, you see FY '21. On the bottom row, you see FY '22. And once DESE updates these, we'll be able to show you '22 and '23. But what this does, it breaks down per pupil expenditures by bucket. So how much are we spending on administration, instructional leadership, teachers, other teaching services, PD, guidance counseling, pupil services, operations, health insurance, all of that, retirement for all of our teachers, paraprofessionals, everyone. So you see all of that in there. And when Hopkinton is in the bottom 25% in any one of those categories, what we do is we put a red circle around it. And so you can see that we are in the bottom 25%, which means we're really not spending a lot of money on those things as compared to other school districts across the Commonwealth. If we are in the blue, we're in the bottom 50%. In FY '21, we were in the top 30% for professional development. Other than that, we've never been red, anything but red or blue. And I think that, I said it the other night, and I'll say it again, that this is really something to, I think, in a lot of ways, celebrate that we're getting a lot of bang for our tax dollars. But I think it's also something to say, sort of thank you to our teachers, our paraprofessionals, our administrators, because they are providing top-notch education at very, very reasonable prices. And really all the people in our district. I don't want to omit anyone, because I think it really takes a village to be able to put together the package that we have. So thank you for indulging me and letting me present that one more time.
Well, I think it's really important for the community to really hear this message and to really understand the budget. After the meeting Tuesday night, I was out at a group last night speaking to some residents too about some of the issues that are coming up as they're thinking about, because everyone's concerned about the large tax bills that are coming by, and they've started to hear that from the select board, and the select board says nobody really listens, and they're trying to get that message. I think we equally need to get this message out about the return on investment, as Mr. Herr said on Tuesday night, and really what's facing us in our budgets and why we're making the decisions we're making.
I agree, because when you start looking at it in terms of teacher-to-student ratio, that's something that a parent can identify with. I mean, I'm old enough that I had classes 130 when I was a student, and to have had, even when I taught, most of them were 1 to 25, which is, it doesn't sound like a lot. It's a lot to handle on 25 second graders would be a mess. 25 juniors in high school produce an awful lot of paper to be read and graded.
A lot of
That's
people
what-
who read and graded.
Yeah.
I had a
Of all the
question
efforts in the world.
that may have been answered when the solar farm, I don't know if that's the right word, that was put in the middle school parking lot. Does that save us money, make us money? Have we seen savings? Do we have them are there other places that we could put them if it does save us money?
That was addressed in your document somewhat.
Yes, so we have kind of built out as much solar as we possibly can. There's a couple stories behind the solar. The middle school canopy and roof, new installation is not lit up yet. We are waiting on a transformer from Eversource. So right now, it's a large shade structure. It's not doing anything for us. The bus canopy is, and the new installation on the high school is. So we do have solar on all the roofs. We added those 2 canopies. In addition, we have signed a contract for solar installations that are actually on South Street. So they're not school buildings, so we're getting some benefit from the solar generation over there as well. So we're trying to do as much as we can to offset our electric.
Do you ever foresee canopies on like the student parking lot?
The thing with canopies, the installation, the cost of installation, so we don't own these. They're all power purchase agreement. So the cost of installation makes the return on investment for us much less than it is to put them on a roof.
Okay,
Because obviously,
right, they take more,
they're going to cover their costs.
right.
So are we seeing, I know the middle school canopy isn't operation yet, but on the other, either canopy or on the rooftops, is it saving us, the district, money?
Yeah, absolutely.
After, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Any other questions? Great. So I'm going to stand in for Nancy's school committee chair report. It's very brief. The payroll warrants S25004 has been approved, and the warrant is in your folder. And now we're up to liaison reports. Any liaison reports?
Kyla and I went to the CPAC administrative meeting, and they're really working on an innovative idea. I think Kyla can probably explain it better. It's called Project Shark, and it's about trying to subsidize things that are needed in special education
Really
classrooms.
liken it to what the HPTO is doing and providing enrichment in other things that are nice to have that you aren't able to cover in your operating budget for the teachers and program. But this one's specifically targeted to special education classrooms and garnering donations from families for those materials that teachers would really like to enhance their programs, but didn't make the budget cut.
They also have a interesting meet the special education teachers. What night is that?
Oh, next Tuesday night.
Tuesday night at
To
the
meet all the
library?
administrators at the library,
Yeah.
yeah. It seems like it'll be a great evening.
And that might not have gotten a lot of
Publicity.
publicity, and it would be a really important thing for
And the
parents to
fall
come to.
festival, right,
Yes.
too, in October.
Great. And so the next Tuesday is the 17th.
Yes,
Lovely.
at the library.
Do you know the time?
I knew you were going to ask that.
I was trying to pull up the email real fast.
It's in my calendar. I want to say it's 6:30, but I could be wrong.
That sounds about right.
Great, and I'm sure they'll put it on their
6:30.
website.
Yes.
6:30, thank you.
6:30 in the library on
All
Tuesday,
right.
17th. Wonderful. LPAC is waiting to elect officers. I connected with Jen Suker, and so she'll keep me in the loop for when the LPAC team is in place. Youth Commission is meeting next week on Wednesday night. I'm going to be late because it is the same night as third grade curriculum night. So I'll be late to that one, but I'll be there. Chris, do you have any?
None for me.
Great. So we're moving into the school improvement plans. If Mrs. Dubois and Mr. Cotter would like to come up. Only 10 minutes behind.
Talk
I love-
fast.
I ask a lot of questions, though, so you never know.
Yeah, that,
So as you mentioned, curriculum night, one of our counterparts, Principal Browninger, is at his child's curriculum night. We said that's important. You have got to go. Our plan is a collaborative plan, so we will certainly present this and, you be with your family because that's so important. So here we are. This is our second year having a joint school improvement plan, a SIP, we often refer to it, throughout all the elementary schools. In years past, we worked on connecting Center at the time in Elmwood, but now we've recently looped that all the way up through fifth grade. So preschool through fifth grade, we have alignment and common elements, which really helps with those transitions from school to school when you have programs that are moving up appropriately as the children mature, but are present in their prior schools. We focus on two main goals. Oh, I need to thank our school councils. So our school councils meet over the course of the year. So this plan that you're seeing now was our school councils that were in the past year. Some parents like to say have aged out because their children have moved on to new buildings. And some are able to remain on our councils, but we are fortunate that we have great participation in our councils, bringing forth questions, concerns from the community, as well as good questions in terms of where we are with our goals. So, we can't function without them, so we just want to make sure we thank those parents. So we have two goals that we focus on in our improvement plans. Not that we only do two things, but you'll see they're quite comprehensive, and they're robust. Here we go. Our first goal is to refine and grow the multi-tiered systems of support to meet every student's academic and social emotional needs every day. So when you think about that, wow, that is a lot. So as we wordsmith and talk about what does that mean, our theory of action behind that is if we center first on learning foundational skills within a community, gradually introducing more diverse pathways as students mature and invest in students' social, emotional, behavioral, and physical wellness, and if we commit to growing programs that help all students access challenging curricula, then we foster students who will learn to take risks, think independently, believe in themselves, persevere, and grow academically. So that is a large umbrella for Goal 1. And now Matt can talk about some of the details within that.
And so ultimately, what the school improvement plan does is becomes the driver for all the classroom teachers as they start setting their team goals or individual professional practice goals and student learning goals. So what they do is look through the actions and the success criteria that we put in here to try to branch off of those more individually. So some of these items have sort of lived in our SIP last year, and then we felt like were important enough that we either didn't get to everything or felt like we could grow them even more this year to help sort of tackle all of the different elements of Goal 1 when we think about the academics and the social emotional learning of our students. So, one of the first action items that we have in here is to continue to work with the CRIOP, which is that tool that we had adopted through the work that we did with Blackprint the last few years, and really measure how we're doing with our cultural responsive practices in the classroom and as a school by starting to work in that observation tool that teachers can use peer-to-peer or that administrators can use in the classroom just to sort of dipstick how we're doing in this realm. We're trying to catch all of the needs for kids, which we know aren't just academic, right? We need a lot of our kids report that they feel really connected to school, right, and they're really happy at school. But some kids, right, that's still a challenge. And so the purpose of doing this work is to make sure that we make those connections with every single kid. In here, you'll also see action items around MTSS Tier 1 and Tier 2. In here, with that, what we're really doing is trying to think about how kids access our Tier 1 instruction, which is that instruction that you think of from the general education teacher. And then do they need a little bit more than that? Do they need some math, boosted math facts, or do they need some reading instruction? So that would be considered like your Tier 2. And what can the teacher intervene with in Tier 2? Where do our reading specialists and math specialists step in to work with those kids in Tier 2? So we're really trying to frame that decision-making process to make sure that kids are getting that Tier 1 instruction, but then also getting access to that Tier 2 instruction as well. Yeah.
What is BPIS?
PBIS.
PBIS.
Positive behavioral interventions and supports. So
Okay.
we have focused a lot on Tier 1. What are the common expectations? At Marathon, even our little ones can say them. Take care of myself, take care of each other, take care of this place. So knowing
Excellent.
what those expectations are helps you then be able to feel comfortable, secure, you know what's going on. But so their Tier 1 supports, the staff completely understand. We have common language throughout our schools. Looking at more Tier 2, what's the next step when someone needs a little bit more? An analogy that we talked about this summer was the dentist, Think of the teacher as your dentist. You might need at times to see an orthodontist or an oral surgeon. You don't skip the dentist, who is the Tier 1 provider. You might have others that come and go. So think of our tiers as who else might come and go to work on those needs for students, and they'll change as student needs change, whether they're academic, whether they're social emotional. And something we wanted to do is connect that better than we have in the past. Sometimes we've had them in separate places, if you will. How do we connect that to address the whole child a little better than we have in the past?
Good, because I think sometimes we have things that we talk about and we flip around terms, and I don't think people in the audience understand what those things are.
Great
So
point.
a good example of like Tier 2 PBIS would be a check-in, check-out system for certain kids. Some kids need to have that positive contact with an adult to start their day, just to kind of get them settled. Some kids don't need that, right? So that's what makes that Tier 2, is that it's a smaller percentage of kids that need that.
Excellent.
So as you go through the tiers, you're thinking of more higher level of intervention for less students.
Thank you.
Yep.
You know what, but what we'll do to that point is where we had the culturally responsive introduction observation protocol, then CRI-OP, we'll add that language
think we
before
spell out.
PBS. Because.
Thank you very
Yeah, I don't
much.
think we spell out
Yeah,
PBIS,
we'll
yeah.
add that.
Could you
And I'm not
also,
good with the acronyms myself either, so.
could you also define, I don't know, culturally responsive? What does that look like?
So the pillars we're focusing on are classroom relationships and instructional practices. How do we make sure children feel connected? How do we make sure they see themselves in the classroom, in the curriculum materials? Think about connections. Our population is changing in our schools. It's changing throughout our community. How do we make sure everybody feels welcome and invested in that? So that's it in a really pared down nutshell.
Excellent, thank you
Okay.
so much.
All right, and then the last bullet that I just want to touch on is we are going to look at our learning support team process and just look to see if we need to do any restructuring or refinement to that process. So the learning support team is a team of educators and administrators that meet to discuss kids that might be struggling academically, and we want to look at, all right, what data do we need to collect in order to make the right decisions on what interventions they may or may not need. And as students go through the LST process, we do check-ins usually every 6 weeks on their progress. And if students are able to make progress on those goals that we've set forth throughout the LST process, that's great. If they're not making that progress, then we go back to the drawing board and find out, well, what more do they need? Oftentimes, LSTs can end in a building-based accommodation plan. It could end in a recommendation for like a 504 evaluation, IEP, or the interventions that we've used under Tier 2 worked and they did well, and we document that so that it goes to the next grade and they don't have to recreate that blueprint again for that student. And so just as the elementary team, we want to look at that process and make sure that we're still doing that the right way to help kids. Do you want to go to the next one, or-
Sure. Our second goal focuses on written language. We introduced this in our recent plans, where we know it was a curriculum area that during the pandemic really didn't have much attention and was sorely in need of some revision to that. So our goal is to enhance written language curriculum to promote increased writing opportunities and cross-curricular connections. So now we're at the point where we've worked on updating our, and we still have, you're never done. We're always going to update and go back and revisit those lessons and units. But now how can we connect them to other areas of our curriculum? So we have a program that came in, social studies program that we piloted last year, K-3, called Children Discovering Justice. There's a rich, robust literature that's a component of that. How can we connect the writing from just writing units, if you will, to that curriculum content area? How can we connect that to math? We've used a graphic organizer, and while it's focusing on the upper elementary, we start that organizer in kindergarten, where they're starting to explain and document evidence, like we're using those terms with children. So how do you show your answer? What are your strategies? And it's a little drawing, but that's their evidence and that's their label. I'll let you talk a little bit.
Well, I think the challenge with teaching
Yeah.
young kids writing is that you want to teach the systematic approach of how you should be setting up your writing, but doing that in a vacuum can make it really boring, right? And so looking at how we can make those cross-curricular connections for kids to really try to engage their background, what they already know about, that pulls out so much more interest and really much more robust writing from them. So it's trying to, on the one hand, teach them that sort of like, this is how you write, right? These are the systems that we want you to use, but we want to talk about this, thing that's in your life through CDJ, right? That you can relate to, that you can then write a lot about and know how to talk about it.
So we've learned that we do need some structure to that, and we have found great success with using organizers like Strategies for Self-Developed Regulation, SRSD. Just to say write about your weekend is really overwhelming, especially for young children. They cannot pick that out. It is a lot. So having a guide where you've got visuals and little checks of what you can draw to help you there has proved very helpful to us and successful. But something we're noticing is sometimes the writing is too formulaic as they move through the grades. So we want a little more opportunity for creativity and a little bit more of their voice and passion to come through.
What do you attribute to creating the formulaic writing?
So they are rule followers, many of them, and they know this is how I set up an informational piece, this is how I set up a persuasive piece.
And this is
almost
grade what?
Even, I would say even at the lower levels, it starts and they follow, but then you'll see the risk takers start to enter their voice, and that's fantastic. So it's sort of giving writers to be permission and take risks while maintaining a structure to a writing piece. So that's a lot, because we definitely have to get the formula and structure of a piece. Otherwise, it's not necessarily cohesive, it doesn't flow, it doesn't have those elements you would like in a writing piece. But we're at the point now where we can start to weave in other aspects where then you're going to get more of, and I would say, their voice and their passion.
I think where we've seen a lot of growth, especially last year, and we wanted to keep this in our SIP for this year because we want to continue to see that, was the writing and math. I can speak for 4th and 5th grade. I know when I did math, I did it my one way and that was it, and I don't know why I did it that way. right? It's just what I was told. These kids now can write you a whole paragraph explaining why they did it this way. And if you really want to know, I could tell you how I would do it 5 other ways, and they're able to write that out too. And that's part of what they're learning, and is being able to explain their thinking. So they're really manipulating math. And
So it's that
part of that
critical
is
thinking,
writing.
not just
Yeah.
the rote answer,
Right.
but that critical thinking and analysis in being able to convey that. So that's a really higher level skill. Even at the younger levels, we can get at it in different ways. It'll look very different than the 4th grader who might be writing the paragraph with multiple ways, but they can give other reasons why. So we start small.
That's really,
Yeah.
really great.
It's a great skill. I mean, you even look at like tonight when Dr. Kavanaugh is presenting the budget, you have questions, right, about the math, and you need to be able to articulate that, right? And that's part of what this is, what 4th and 5th graders are doing, is preparing to do things like that.
I really appreciate the way that you're balancing the pedagogy of telling kids what to learn and how to learn, but bringing in some of those principles of bringing in their experiences that come from andragogy, like the adult learning, because I think that does apply to children learning as well as adults. And we don't give them enough credit, saying they just need to be told what to do.
Right.
So it's really nice to enrich that teaching and highlight their experiences.
But
So-
sometimes that's a challenge. Some kids like to be told what to
What
do.
to
It's
do.
easier, and they get really good at doing what they're supposed to do. And now the challenge is like, no, it's getting that free thinking in there. So.
And that's a process that doesn't just happen overnight. Where's the appropriate place to sort of interject this and let it shine, that then you're going to get great return on that instructional engagement? So that's part of the work ahead. That's
And
why.
it's learning how to think critically,
And,
as opposed to memorizing your addition.
right, it's a little harder.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable. We call that productive struggle.
But it's, in the long run, they are skills that they need to hone so that by the time they reach the upper levels, their critical thinking skills are much better.
Right, and at the lower levels, part of that is you don't finish a writing piece every time you start one. And it's hard to leave it and come back. So that's, that basic bit of, we're gonna come back to it, is a lot of work at our level. But some of the elements that you'll see that we're doing that, we touched on that self-regulated strategy development, that's that SRSD, so that will be there refined with graphic organizers. And what's nice is that's familiar to students throughout the elementary schools. The graphic organizers get more complex. Children can go back and find evidence in their writing, but it's something that we build on appropriately so as they move through the grade levels. We're looking at those cross-curricular connections again, thinking about math as well, science. We'll be working with science this year, starting to really look at, we had an audit, an independent, not an independent investigation, but a curriculum review. We know we have work to do in science, and we're really excited because here's a great opportunity. Think of young children and observation logs. I mean, there's so many great writing opportunities. So chances are you might see science next year when we're back
I
here
think so.
with that. And we work on our teachers getting together to review writing samples and prompts and student work. What is, when we're scoring them with a rubric, if you will, making sure that we've got the inter-rater reliability, and what does it look like? What is an exemplar? And that is always going to be work that you tend to make sure that you've got sort of that, settled base that you're working off of. Yes. Any questions?
I'm just
that you have?
excited what you're doing.
And while it seems like, oh, you only have 2 goals, there's a lot in there.
Yeah,
So
these are packed goals.
they are rich, they're robust, and teachers will develop their professional learning goals, their student learning goals. The SIP is a guide, as well as the district improvement plan. And we work on developing goals that everyone can connect to. It's amazing when you see some of our related arts teachers and how they connect their professional practice goals to what you might think is classroom teacher goals. It's pretty great to have that across your staff. Yeah.
I'll be quiet now.
Okay, Susan.
Any other questions for them?
They thought that was going to be really quick.
We'll do the 2 together.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, all right, thanks.
And hopefully some of those terms might have been familiar to you.
Yes, they were.
That was the test.
See, that's exactly it. Having taught writing, it's, you know, at the upper levels.
I got you.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, okay.
Good.
I'll go this way before I take my stamp down.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for inviting me in tonight to talk about our school improvement plan.
Thanks.
Good to see you all again. We're off to a good start
I promise I'll be
at
quiet.
HMS. So our school improvement plan for this year has 4 goal areas, similar to last year. And as a building, staff are pursuing year 2 of the professional goals that we started together as a staff last year. So you'll see a lot of that reflected in here, as well as responses to a couple of new things that are happening in the building. So just a brief overview. The first goal is around social emotional learning and equity. So we're exploring 2 actions here, but both are really continuations of work that we did last school year. So the first is professional time being dedicated to Pillar 1 of the CRIOP, that culturally responsive observational practice tool. That's around classroom environment, and as a building, we're committed to that really being the focus of our first couple of weeks to make sure that students are feeling welcomed and connected in the building. The specific action that we started on day 1 that teachers returned was thinking about how students can be reflected in the classroom space. Where do they see themselves? Is it a display in the room? Is it in the classroom library, books that, you know, relate to who they are as people? So that work is ongoing, but going a little bit deeper this year. And then last year, we really started to dig into our HSA data. That's the Holistic Student Assessment. Students complete that. It's a self-assessment tool. And in the spring of last year, we looked at data over a couple of years for students to not only identify how students were feeling on a day-to-day basis, which is really good data to have, but also to identify supports that those students might need. So we led those data reviews in teams, as you know, the middle school is grouped by teams, looking at data and discussing students, and we're going to continue that practice this year. So those are our 2 actions under our first goal. The second goal is relative to curriculum and instruction. There's a lot in this goal, but again, some of it is continuation of last year with the addition of looking at data relative to curriculum and instruction of the Math 6 Plus course that we added this year and is underway. So specific to math, students have taken their initial STAR assessment. That's important to give us some pre-data as we go into the school year. We're looking at student performance in both classes, grade 6 math and grade 6 plus, and observing student performance and seeing the impacts. We'll be looking at the impact of that new course to see how students are responding to it. Similar to last year, the math department is engaging in curricular work on differentiation in the classroom so that math is accessible to all of their learners. They'll have some professional development tomorrow on the early release day. We'll be working with the math teacher, their co-teachers throughout the school. All math levels will be working on differentiation tomorrow afternoon. And then the rest of the staff will be engaged in actions really relative to the first 2 action items under curriculum instruction, and those are culturally responsive practices specifically through the lens of disciplinary literacy, which is what does writing look like across all of the disciplines in departments in the school. So that would be led by Julie Mattson, the middle school ELA director, and our new assistant principal, Lauren McDonough. They're going to lead that session tomorrow. It's going a little bit deeper into some of the work that they led last year. So I'm excited for teachers to be identifying the different type of texts that students will encounter in each of those classes. What does it look like to read a text in the science room as opposed to in the civics room, the ELA room? So that'll be interesting to dig into tomorrow, and they'll leave with some ideas for introducing, really a variety of writing strategies, whether it be a quick write at the end of a period or a lengthier essay assignment. So what does writing look like across all disciplines? That's work continued from last year. Some of it's already happening. There was a great display I saw in our 8th grade hallway in our civics class. They just had a quick, like, little ticket, what does civics mean to me? And it was just great to read those examples, and they're, plastered on the wall outside of that teacher's room. So students are already engaged in a lot of writing and sharing their ideas.
What is the Math 6 Plus course?
So last year it was decided that we were going to take essentially the problems work that has traditionally been enrichment and make that part of a standard curriculum of delivery for a certain set of students coming up from the Hopkins School. So we still have that practice in most of our math classes. We have a wide range of learners with enrichment problems available to all. But we are running a 6+ course where those enrichment problems are essentially just part of the standard curriculum delivered to everyone in that class.
Thanks.
You're welcome. The third goal is specific to culturally proficient practice. This is, again, a continuation of work from last year. So I don't have a ton to comment on this, other than one thing that we're going to try this year are classroom observation walks. So we started talking about this day 1, day 2 of the teacher's return to school. Again, how are your students reflected in the classroom setting? And we're designing a day that will happen at the building-based meeting in October, where teachers will actually walk the school, visit each other's classrooms, kind of make observations and suggestions to see how teachers are, fulfilling kind of that practice. And then the fourth goal is relative to special education. This is, as you know from my presentation, of the student handbook. This is a really important area to me. We have a lot of work to do making everyone, teachers, families, students, comfortable with the new IEP document. Our staff was really excited to hear about this from Nicole Murray, who's the Special Education Director, 6 through 12. Excited and curious about the student voice aspect in the new IEP. And the other thing that came out of that presentation is looking at the Ed B portion of that, and what information can teachers provide for an IEP meeting that will be helpful to students and their families. We have an afternoon of professional development planned coming up to talk about that. And then the second action step in here, again, we talked about this prior to the start of the school year. I announced this on opening day and was not expecting applause from the staff, but it was a great sign of the enthusiasm in our building to become a Special Olympics Unified Champion School. So we have a sign-up happening right now for Unified Bocce. We're looking to get that started in the beginning of October with our bocce coach, Nicole Smith, who we believe is a highly skilled bocce instructor.
Does she play bocce?
She does now. So if you know Nicole, I mean, huge heart, and
She learned it.
she'll do anything for our students. So thank you. So we're working together on that. A lot of faculty excited to get in there and play bocce with the kids, and so just really. That's the type of thing that can really give a real, jolt of positive culture to a school. So we're excited to get that going in October.
I hope I'm not going off too much off topic, but I was hoping you might be able to talk about the middle school book this year.
Oh, the
I thought
community read.
Yeah, because I
Yeah,
thought
I'd
it
love
would
to
be
talk
nice
about that.
if I could invite my fellow board members to join me in reading.
Great. So, so the planning that we've done on the community read is selected a book called Harbor Me by Jacqueline Woodson. And the night for that is November 14th. I say with like 90% positivity. But it's if you're a middle school parent, it's in the Hiller Heads Up, and we're mentioning it back to school nights.
We have a school committee meeting that night.
We have a school committee meeting that night?
Yeah,
Well, we'll have to talk about it here while they're talking.
Yeah.
So we wanted to do something that would be a great, meaningful collaboration with families. We selected a text that's an easy read. As I said at the sixth grade back to school night, I love that book. Like, if you're looking to read someone who can really capture like what teenagers sound like, it's awesome. So you're reading it and laughing because it sounds like we did with our friends when we were teenagers. But it's a great group of students depicted in the book. The middle school students will certainly identify with it, but parents will as well. So it's truly an event for all readers in your family. We're hoping to get parents, siblings, students there. And that's essentially the extent of the planning right now. So what we plan to do is to push out a Google form, so there's like an RSVP, and based on the number of people that respond, we're going to design an activity, but essentially like a book club.
You said it was Harbor Me?
Yes, Harbor Me, Jacqueline Woodson.
I had a question on the culturally proficient practice. Does that mean that the goal is for each room to be culturally reflective of the kids in that room?
Yes, and it can reflect like just different aspects of who they are. So like that short, I just want the students to be reflected in the room. Some students are deciding to share an aspect of their culture. Others are sharing an interest that could be shared amongst, any culture. So it's,
I mean, this is students sharing it with the other students, not decorations on the wall. Or does it include
it
that?
would include that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But don't the kids change rooms? How does that?
Yeah, they
that
do.
get
We're working
tricky?
through that right
Okay.
now. Yeah.
Well, if they move
So
from
some
room to room, they can see other people's.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Yeah, so
it seems like
I'm
a lot to
hoping
manage.
that will evolve over time, whereas right now it might be the student's homeroom that's on their walls. But
Okay.
as different projects happen over the year, as
Right.
different things are shared, hoping that the space will reflect that.
Got it.
Last year, we had a social emotional learning consultant come through the building, and it seemed like pretty overwhelming that the rooms that had some element of that are just a very different space.
Some student-designed
Yeah, student work.
experience
Yeah.
in the room helped other students feel more
Yeah,
comfortable.
so a birthday wall would be an example of that. Student knows that their name is up there, and everybody else knows when their birthday is. In an eighth grade classroom, might be a piece of writing, that's up there as a student exemplar.
Is there data that shows that produces better learners?
Well,
It's reflected in the CRIOP.
yeah, so in,
Do
oh,
you
go
want me to
ahead.
tell the history of the CRIOP? Because it's.
Sure.
Do you mind?
I don't-
So the CRIOP's a very interesting thing, and we learned this from our consultants who came in. There were two women who had a new reading program, and they were going to go into this school and train all the teachers in how to deliver this new reading instruction. And at the end, they found that their reading instruction thing might not have actually been as effective as they believed it would be. But what they did see in that school is in classrooms where kids had the highest achievement, there were certain conditions in those rooms, and one of them was that first pillar of the CRIOP, that it was a culturally responsive environment. And there are other things like reaching out to parents, how do you present curriculum in a culturally responsive way? All of those things ended up being part of the CRIOP. So it was really pretty organic, the way it came about. But
So there's data that
There
does
is.
back it up. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yep.
All right.
And I'm hoping that we'll have our own at the end of the school year.
Yeah.
Where a lot of what's in here, they use the term, separate the terms from generally effective practices with culturally responsive practices. And many of our teachers are already doing things that are culturally responsive. They're just not doing it like from that angle. It's
Right.
just natural. But I'm hoping that with a school-wide push for it, that we'll see it in some of those internal measures that we have over the course of the year.
Got it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would welcome a motion about the elementary and middle school improvement plans for 2024 and 2025.
I move to approve the elementary and middle school improvement plans for 2024 to 2025.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the plans and a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you. And now, Mr. Andrade for the athletics department.
Good evening, everybody.
How'd the girls' soccer team do? Do you know?
We're up 2-0 at half, the last time I checked. They're playing a game right now down
Yeah,
Fairfield.
you had missed it
Yes,
earlier.
Savannah
You-
told us.
Yeah, we were curious how they were doing.
Yep, they're a really good team this year.
Yeah,
so,
they're great.
Yeah. So I'm here to talk a little bit about a gift that our athletics booster club is looking at buying us, the athletic department. Last year I came up here and I actually talked a little bit about our transportation issues within athletics. Bus issues, late buses, canceled events because of late buses. Our athletic program is large. Some days we have 4 buses that go out, and often the bus company will tell us that 2 of those buses are gonna be over an hour late. So I've been looking at alternatives, and one of the alternatives was actually a minibus, which is a 14-passenger vehicle that can be driven by anybody with a normal license. And those licenses, and they would undergo some training prior to driving them, but they'd be able to transport their own teams to different areas. And so now this is a little bit of a different vehicle. It's a Sprinter van, but it's the same idea. It's a 14-passenger Sprinter van, and it's more cost-effective. And it would be an incredible help to our department for specifically in the fall and the spring when we have a ton of teams that have to get out to fields. And it will help us in the long run, stop us from having to cancel events, which is the last thing that I want to do. A lot of other districts have minibuses. I think 10 out of the 12 within the league have minibuses. We're one of the ones that does not. And I think every time I go to a golf match, I see a minibus from another school. So this has been a lot of kind of like work in the making. So I'm hopeful that this will come to fruition and I'll be able to use it for our teams. So, I went over some of the basic information, but the cost of the actual vehicle is $77,000, brand new. And the Booster Club is willing to gift this vehicle to us. And so covering the upfront cost there. And then as we kind of get into managing the cost of the vehicle, that will come out of our athletics school budget. And some of the specific uses for us, I've talked a little bit, our golf teams, in the last year and a half have not been able to consistently get buses because their events happen pretty quickly after school, and that's just due to tee times that the courses give us. And so this would significantly help them. We have varsity and JV golf teams. We've used our alternate transportation form for our golf teams to travel over the last year and a half. But for our JV teams, a lot of whom don't drive, they don't have parents that are available to drive. It makes it very, very difficult for them to get to matches, and a lot of times we have to cancel those matches. And so we usually bring anywhere from 10 to 12 of those student athletes to those matches. Additionally, our girls and boys tennis teams typically are smaller teams, and so they'll travel. They would be using this vehicle as well. Some of our basketball teams would be able to use these vehicles, or this vehicle. Cheer, JV and middle school wrestling, some overflow transport for our cross-country and track and field teams. Sometimes we have 60 cross-country athletes and 50 can fit in a bus. This will allow us to kind of have another transportation vehicle without having to get another bus and free up another bus to take an earlier trip for another team. Would also work for shuttles to close by schools, which we typically do for buses anyways, and it would also be able to let us take the students to more student leadership conferences, MIA events, DEI Summit, some of those events that in the past we've had to try and get a bus for, and sometimes we can't because they're during the school day. And then I'm always open to the van being used in other ways, whether it's during school, for field trips, or club activities that go off-site, other student conferences, being able to have that vehicle to transport a smaller group of students to different things would be incredibly beneficial for those groups. And then, some of the cost analysis that I've looked at, it would save us potentially up to $25,000 on transportation over a year. We would be putting probably about 10,000 miles on it every year. And if they're maintained well, they last for 100,000 miles or more. Coaches, staff members, administrators, paraprofessionals, any other really school employees could potentially drive the vehicle. And we could potentially work out trying to figure out pay if we had someone else other than a coach driving that vehicle.
How
And
about the insurance on the coach who drives the vehicle?
I think we'd have to look at maybe changing some wording in the contract to say like it might be possible that-
Staff are covered by the school insurance.
Okay.
And then we have existing procedural manuals for other districts that have minivans. And so we would take, I think, a lot of that and implement it here so that we have, background checks and training and making sure that we're not just throwing someone behind the wheel with students. And so to kind of conclude, this would be an incredibly helpful vehicle for us. I think it'd be awesome for the school as well. And I think it would be beneficial to a number of student athletes over the next 10 years.
I think this is really a great thing that the boosters are doing for the whole school, actually.
Yeah.
Do they identify a vehicle, or is this conceptual right now?
I haven't identified a vehicle. That's why I'm trying to move on it a little bit quicker.
Will you be branding the vehicle with HHH on it, HH,
Yep.
you know?
Is that covered in the cost of it, the wrapping?
No, but we would be able to get that done.
Yeah, that's short money anyways. I was just
Yeah.
curious. This seems like a total no-brainer. This is
Yeah.
easy to me. Again, you've brought it up, it's just making sure that coaches, staff, or otherwise are screened enough so that someone who's had something to drink or something else, or, just making sure that, I'm sure there's some type of procedure in place for all that stuff anyways, but this is great. A huge help from the booster, so.
Yeah.
Does it need to be a commercial driver's license, or is it small enough that can be
No.
operatable by anyone? with a
Nope.
driver's
So if it's 14 passenger or under, it's operatable by anyone who has a driver's license. Yeah. That's why we're not asking for a 20 passenger one.
Yeah.
Well, then I move to accept this donation from the boosters for a 14-passenger van for the athletic department.
Second.
Do we have a vote?
Is there something?
Yes, so.
Okay,
we-
I saw those looks.
No, that's okay. We had had a conversation, I think, in agenda planning,
Yeah.
that one of the things we wanted to make sure was that we knew what the van was, so that we actually had a price tag for you to vote on. So, as soon as you have a van and the boosters say, yes, we'll purchase that, then you'll be able to make a vote so that you can say, accept a van in the amount of $77,252.83, or, you just want to make sure that you have a dollar amount.
So we
That way
are,
we don't approve something that's $5 under.
Yep. I got you.
so what is it that we want to approve then?
So I don't know that you want to approve anything
Yeah, we
tonight,
can't make
because
a
right now
motion
you
until-
have something that is just an
Conceptual?
idea, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
But once we have the real thing.
We're
then we can
enthusiastic about the idea, though.
Oh, I see, there was no, motion
Right.
would be to determined.
But you've identified,
I have, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think we just have to kind of
Yeah.
buckle down some details.
I think it's just,
This is,
numbers on a page.
it's really conceptual for the committee to determine that this is the path
Got
they
it.
would like him to take.
Okay.
And then and then also giving that message to the boosters, instead of the boosters buying something
so
that the
the
committee
next meeting will
wasn't
accept
ready
it.
to accept, so.
Okay, thank you.
And if
very
it
much.
needed, because you said it's a little time sensitive, if you get the number, let's say it's 77 on the dot, do we have to wait till next meeting if time is, if it's, right? If it's time sensitive, can that be approved ahead of a meeting?
You would have
or-
to wait till the next meeting unless you wanted to schedule a meeting. I mean, it could even be a virtual meeting as long as you posted 48 hours in advance.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the van and the van could be gone in 4 days and you don't want to wait 2 weeks, I just
Right.
don't want to hold up a
Yeah.
good opportunity just for waiting. We can all, I assume, get on a Zoom call or if we
Yeah.
need to. So-
but he
okay, all right.
knows that we're on board with
Okay,
him.
I got it.
Yes.
We're on the van,
Great.
We're back here in 2 weeks.
and we want to ride.
You're all welcome to come on a ride as soon as I get trained.
Yeah, you can drive the van to the meeting next time.
Yeah, yeah. All right, thank you very much.
Great,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thank
Take a
you.
tour then.
And thanks for your work on this. You've worked really hard on this.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we have the Hopkins LMS project. Lower middle school, is that LMS? Yeah. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us this evening. I'm excited to be here, this big milestone. And Chris loads up, we presented in front of you guys a couple weeks ago with an update, so you saw a lot of the exciting things happening over the summer. And we're here for a major milestone to approve the contract and present it to you guys. And so Chris has got a presentation that he's queuing up to kind of walk you guys through it and take any questions.
So, thank you. So we thought, based on how some of our previous discussions would go, given that this is a major milestone, approving a construction contract in full, that it made sense to just touch back on some of the items that led to this point and to sort of explain the contract that you're agreeing to sign or endorse tonight. So the project pursued CM at risk, which is Chapter 149A of the Mass General Law. And what it is it is considered CM at risk, or construction manager at risk. It basically is an alternative to getting a hard bid that would be one big number that covers everything on the drawings. Instead, what they do is they provide, the CM's brought in as a service, and so they provide pre-construction services in the course of design. And then when you get to construction services, as opposed to saying, you gave us this lump sum, they do open book accounting. So they work with you, you can see the bids of the various folks who are submitting those bids, and you collaborate with them in selecting who you release to award. The pre-construction services are something that they provide you a price for upfront, and so you consider that when you select the CM. And they also, when you get to construction at the GMP stage, they'll bid the project, but they bid it in two different ways with a public bid. So there are trade bidders in Massachusetts who have to be publicly bid separately once you have 100% documents, and then there's the remainder, the balance of the trades, and they're procured by Commodore directly. Commodore reaches out to subs, they collaborate with us and the designer on the subs they want to go out to, and then they compare their bids, and we work collaboratively to release to those subs. The GMP that's before you this evening was really started when we agreed to that original contract with Commodore. And so when they submitted their RFP, which was a publicly advertised process, they submitted on several things. One was the percentage of CM contingency, and I'll go into what that is in a second. It was a lump sum of what they thought their general conditions would be. General conditions is a number of categories of work as well as their staff costs over the course of the construction for the proposal that they've given you. They give you the cost of the insurance based on the construction costs that you gave them, as well as the cost of the bond based on the construction that you gave them, and so those are proportional based on where your final construction amount ends up. and they give you a percentage fee markup. And so we ended up interviewing four CMs. We had that information available to us. They each interviewed directly with a subcommittee that had done the pre-qualification, and ultimately we selected Commodore Builders to be the CM at risk for the project. When we get into the GMP, what GMP stands for is Guaranteed Maximum Price. And the Guaranteed Maximum Price is the maximum price that they'll charge you for the scope of work that's on the documents you gave them and that they bidded, as well as what's implied by those documents. So if it's implied that the intent is there, that is what the GMP is intended to cover. And so there may be gray areas in the documents that aren't quite figured out, and so they'll come up with either a hold or an allowance to address those gray areas. So when they bid to the various sub-bidders and they get their numbers back, they'll do de-scoping of what the bidder came back with, and if there's a gap between bidder A and bidder B, they'll either assign a hold or an allowance to those bids that might be a quantity of money that they put in the bid to just level them against each other. So they make sure that they're comparing apples to apples when they finally select who the bidder is. A hold is a contractual mechanism where it's an amount of money, but Commodore is agreeing to provide whatever that hold represents in terms of scope of work for that amount of money. And if they exceed that, it stays within the construction contract, and depending on how big the exceedance is, it either comes from the contingency, the CM's contingency that's within the GMP, or it eventually would come out of their fee if they drastically over or underestimated what that would be. In contrast, there's an allowance within it as well. And the difference between a hold and the allowance is who takes on the risk. So with a hold, Commodore's taking on the risk that they can provide that scope for the amount of money, whereas with an allowance, they're saying, I don't have enough money to take on that risk, but I think it might cost about this amount of money. So the best example for that is the drawing, say, plant some shrubs here. So do you want 4 shrubs or 6 shrubs or 8 shrubs? So they'll make an assumption and assign an amount of money to that. But if you decide you want twice as many shrubs, they wouldn't have known that. And so the allowance difference would come as a change order to the construction contract. Additionally, you're going to hear contingency a lot through the course of the project. And there's 3 different types of contingency. Specifically to start, we're talking about the CM's contingency. So within that guaranteed maximum price contract, they bid that they wanted a 2.5% contingency, which was competitively bid against the other bidders. And that 2.5 contingency covers the scope that isn't identified. And so it's maybe a hold that would be exceeded, and then the balance would come from the contingency, or it might be scope that's shown or implied on the documents, but they didn't discover it during bidding. So we get halfway through the contract and we find a note that applies to a situation that someone's asking a change order for. We'll say, no, that was already in the documents. It should come out of the contingency. There's also a mechanism within the contingency that bid savings, when they buy out each of these trades after we've approved the GMP, those bid savings, they're allowed to put that back into the contingency as a matter of the contract, and they worked with us with the early GMP and agreed that we would re-level the contingency tonight when we're agreeing upon the GMP at that 2.5%. So any bid savings that we have from the folks we've already bought out is essentially leveled off at this point with what we're doing today. Separate from that, within the budget that's provided to you all when we submit the invoice package, there are 2 other contingencies, and those have nothing to do with the construction contract. There's an owner's contingency, which is typically done for the soft costs of the project. So if the designer needs an additional service for something, or if we have an overage somewhere else in the budget unrelated to the construction contract, that contingency would pay for that overage. There's also a construction contingency, and that construction contingency is earmarked for any change orders that come up over the course of the project. So we've been talking for a while about this project, and I know we visited with you back in June when we approved the early amendment, and then subsequently when we approved the generator pre-purchase. Those previous contracts currently amount to $9,285,073. The balance of that GMP that was before you tonight is $29,951,449. And so that makes the final GMP amount, which is inclusive of 3 alternates, which I'll go into in a moment, $39,239,522. Within that pricing is included going back to the building and replacing the pneumatic controls. That was one of the items that we talked about at town meeting last year, or last fall, where we are going in and taking the original pneumatic controls that control the HVAC system within the building. Some of them have been converted over the years, and so we're converting the balance of those controls to modernize the HVAC systems in the building and address some issues that weren't functioning correctly. We're also going to replace the building's original main electrical breaker. It's original to the building from 1996, and it's a majorly important piece of equipment to allow electrical service in the building. So this seems an adequate time to replace that. And after further discussion and seeing where the bids came in, we're also recommending that we upgrade the site curbing from precast concrete that was originally proposed when we bid the civil site contract to that contractor. He provided a price at that time, and so we waited until this point to make a decision on that. But we would be upgrading that to granite curbing. Anyone who has walked by Hopkins knows that the existing precast curbing that was originally installed has had a hard life. And so by installing granite, we think it'll provide much better durability over the long term for the school.
There was also a request that came up through the permitting process specifically to upgrade that to granite.
And so ultimately, we're before you tonight. We have here sort of a comparison of where we landed with this GMP. So in total, when we came before you with the 90% CDs, the cost of that had come down about $290,000 from where we were previously with the alternate. When we came back to you for the early package amendment, we dropped it so that we were saving about $867,000 versus that original budget. And now, since the GMP that Commodore originally submitted on August 3rd to us, we've brought that down a little bit more, so we're now $780,000 less than Commodore had proposed to us when they first submitted the GMP. So all in all, versus the construction budget that was set at town meeting, not the whole project budget, but specifically earmarked for construction, we're down $2,336,477.55. So these are really good news for the town of Hopkinton. I know we're pursuing a lot of construction lately, and so to come in significantly under budget is really advantageous for the town. And we're happy with where this number is at. Commodore's been good to work with so far with the initial work, and we had a successful school opening. And so we're before you today to request authorization of the guaranteed maximum price amendment, amendment number 2. And so we put amendment number 3. So we put the motion up on the screen for you here, but we're happy to take any questions you might have about the contract.
I have some questions. So I understand this correctly. The town voted on the construction budget, not the total cost budget? Do I understand? That's what you just-
The town voted for the total project budget. Inclusive of that was several line items. The $41 million was the line item earmarked for the construction budget itself, but the town appropriated the totality of the total project cost.
Which was what?
$52,400,000.
Inclusive of the design phase, yeah.
Yeah,
In the two,
inclusive.
between
So
the
all
two.
in, the town voted for 52?
Yes.
Okay. And the GMP, all in is 39.
39,238.
239.
Yep.
And that's inclusive of the 3 contingencies, or does not include the 3 contingencies?
Inclusive of one of the contingencies, so the CM's contingency.
The 2.5.
The 2.5, that's correct.
So it's 39 and change plus 2.5
Includes-
potential.
Yeah, that's in that 39.
Oh, it's in the 30.
The
Yeah.
2.5% is within the
It's in the
39.
30. But the owner's contingency and the construction contingency is not in that.
That's correct.
Got it.
So if
And-
you look at, included within your, I know that's tough for you folks to read, but the folks at home can see it. It was, I believe, page 4 of the document that was forwarded to all of you. And this tracks where each of those levels that are, what we're at, what Commodore is taking on, are at with the total construction versus the amendment before you today. So when we did the early amendment, we had $203,500 of contingency within that amendment. When we did the generator, that added an additional almost $4,000 to that overall total. And we're adding an additional $637,540 with tonight's amendment. So you'd have a total contingency within that $39 million number of $844,938.
Got it. So on top of the 39 and change, the owner's contingency and construction contingency, that's based on if there's change orders, 6 bushes, 12 bushes, we want to put 2,000 more square feet in,
Yep.
anything, so I get that. And who makes that decision?
So as part of the,
So when we talked to you at your meeting back in June, I believe it was, we talked about the various gates of change orders, right? And so there are some change orders that are time sensitive, and so as part of that presentation to you guys, we talked about items that were below, I think it was 75,000, we would manage at the team level through the school administration and Nancy, up to 125,000. Anything beyond 125,000 would have to come back in front of the full committee.
Got it.
If you're adding scope that was like square footage or things that are out of program, regardless of the dollar, we'd be bringing out of program items back to you guys.
Got it. So anything above 125 comes to the whole group, anything under 75, you guys just
Manage. yeah.
manage. And in between that number goes to Nancy
In
and
addition
and
to-
Susan. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Sorry, so the total that the town is on the hook for is 39 and change, independent of the owner's contingency and construction contingency.
For the construction contract, right? There are
For-
other contracts that have been let as part of the 52, but for the construction contract.
For the construction contract, right. But the other, the design, you're talking about design?
Yeah, so design and our contract and commissioning agents, those are all within the total $52 million number.
Okay. So I assume based on this and the good news, of course, that we're, that the guaranteed max price is come under budget,
That's correct.
that the only way that we go above the 52 million that the town voted on is if the owner's contingency and the construction contingency push it beyond that.
If you fully exhausted all those items.
And still had more that you wanted to do or
To-
that became necessary.
Right, to do. Got it. Thanks.
Any other questions? So we're looking for the motion that was back.
I move to approve the guaranteed maximum
Sorry, I
price.
just hit the button for you.
Oh, no, we have it on
It's
the,
in the,
I have it.
Okay.
Move to approve the guaranteed maximum price construction contract amendment number 3, inclusive of alternates number 1, pneumatic controls replacement, number 2, replacement of main breaker, and number 4, granite curbing in place of concrete curbing, in the amount of $29,951,449, and direct Vertex to provide Commodore builders with formal notice to proceed.
motion by Jamie, is there a second on that? Second by Susan, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Was he providing the translation?
Yeah, I think we talked for a while.
I don't know how that happened.
But they did it.
That's
It's
good.
pretty interesting.
That was great.
See how
All right, so that moves us into our FY '24 year-end financial report, unless that was taken out of order when I was
Nope.
not here.
We're only 4 minutes behind now.
Thanks to this, this team.
I hit it once.
I appreciate it.
Good night, Mr. Carter. Nice job, Matt.
Okay, thank you. So in your packet, you have the financial report, which is the closing for FY '24, actually. So the summary page indicates there was a positive variance in payroll. However, that was offset by a negative variance in expenses. So the payroll for most of the divisions had a positive variance. The negative variance in payroll was really mostly for substitutes. Most of the positive variance is due to attrition. We did struggle with hiring certain positions throughout the year. So positions stayed open for a long period of time. Some of the positions actually were covered by contracted services, and then, of course, also covered by substitutes, which then created the negative variance in those line items. In the expense side, central office, building and grounds, athletics, regular education, and occupational day all had positive variances. However, that was offset by negative variance, mostly in student services. For central office, the positive variance came from school committee legal and postage. Legal budget is really based on a 3-year historical average, so that's a difficult line to predict. Postage, as we continue to not send home paper and try to migrate to electronic, our postage budget has been able to come down. Athletics, you heard from Mr. Andrade tonight. Transportation was a struggle and a lot of trips were canceled. So our transportation budget under athletics did run under budget, as well as the professional development. And occupational day is really driven by student need. So we estimate the number of students that would attend Norfolk Aggie, but more students who had put in their intent actually decided to stay in Hopkinton, which is good news for the school system. Our utilities, gas, electric, and phone came in under budget. We've talked about solar and the savings that we've been able to accumulate, as well as the new contract that we did for off-site solar. So that does continue to save us money. Gas use, of course, is always weather dependent. So far, we've been running on a warmer winter weathers, so that has been also saving us some money. For student services, out-of-district tuitions contributed to the negative variance, as well as contractual services. And again, these costs are driven by student need and can change year to year, student by student. Translation is also an area that we have really been focusing on making sure that our documents are accessible for all. And so that has driven up that variance for translations for a good reason. So that really is the summary for the operating budget. Taking another step down are the revolving accounts. So you have a detailed analysis in there, both of the balance, but also the long-term projections. So we estimate our usage and offset what we can use in the budget each year. Most of our revolving accounts, you can see, will be able to maintain the usage for a number of years, with the exception of one, and that is the international tuition. At the high school, they bring in students, from international, and they have brought down the number of students, really due to our increasing enrollment. So they're limiting the number of international students that they are able to accommodate. So that has driven down the revenue and will then reduce the offset that we'll be able to utilize moving forward. The special education reserve, Dr. Kavanaugh touched on that with the budget process. And we really do try to utilize the operating general fund appropriation before utilizing the special education reserve. And so there was a savings in special education transportation. So we utilized that savings to reduce the use of that reserve. So that was not utilized by about $50,000. So that'll be, something that we'll be able to look for when we're creating the FY26 budget. And capital projects, most of our projects are complete. Of course, the exception are the larger building projects. Several projects that have been completed came in under budget, such as the Marathon Edition, the high school edition, and the roof replacement. And at town meeting in the spring, this authorized debt was reallocated to the Charles Wood project, as well as the MSBA reimbursements that came in for the Elmwood feasibility study. So again, that was already authorized debt that was just reallocated for the larger project for Charles Wood. So that's a lot of different things. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? All right, thank you. All right, that brings us into the bullying prevention and intervention plan.
Okay, sure. So what I'm sharing with you tonight is really I think, a very subtle change to the bullying prevention and intervention plan. You know that we had just gone through a almost full year process of revising that document. And so, I think we're having trouble getting on that screen tonight. Let's see if we can do it. No, it's not quite working. So we had the bullying prevention and intervention plan in place, and then we had a parent in our district submit a PRS to DESE, which means that they wanted the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to look at something to decide whether the district had been fair to their child or not fair to their child. And it turned out that DESE said, no, I think the district's been very fair to your child, but part of this involved the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education reviewing, kind of with a fine-tooth comb, our bullying prevention and intervention plan. So the one area that they wanted us to make some changes to is just to be clearer on the ways in which we train our staff, so that we are making sure that everyone is trained in in understanding the bullying prevention and intervention plan, and that they all understand the law and how to what to do if you see bullying, or even something that you think is bullying. So all we've done is we've taken this small section right here, and we've made some changes to it. We became very explicit. So for example, we added language that said for new professional staff, the training is conducted through a contracted online professional learning service, and for veteran professional staff, the district produces its own online training materials. Instructional staff members who are hired after the year has begun undergo the same training online within the first month of hire. They wanted us to make sure that we listed all of the people who are trained, and we do train everyone, but we weren't before listing all of them. So we have added that we, in addition to professional staff, it includes our administrative assistants, paraprofessionals, custodians, maintenance, tech support, cafeteria workers, campus aides, bus drivers, to reflect the unique context and needs of these employees. We added in a line that says remedial training takes place when faculty or staff, in the opinion of administration, need more professional learning on a topic. We eliminated this here because it was a little bit 30,000 foot and vague. And then the only other thing that we added here is that the district can modify the curriculum for some of the other groups, but at a minimum, all other staff members will become familiar with this plan, and in particular, how to spot and report bullying. So those are the changes we made as a result of DESE asking us to become more specific. You do need to vote on this when you're comfortable doing that, and then before December 1st, we have to resubmit this to DESE along with a couple of other documents.
Any questions? comments? In terms of, I mean, this is not significant changes. I'm comfortable passing it since it's not significantly different from the plan that went through extensive review. But I would like to hear how other folks feel about that.
I'm comfortable with it.
I agree, yeah.
Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the bullying prevention and intervention plan revisions.
Motion by
Second that.
Chris, second by Kyle. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, then that brings us into item F, which is budget planning. Susan, that's you.
Okay, so I thought it would be, or Dr. Kavanaugh and I thought it would be helpful to really run through the budget process, which has already started, which, for FY '26, to really introduce it to the committee, some of you being new, and just to put it out to the public one more time. As we're developing the budget, we're going back to the strategic priorities in the District Improvement Plan. We are looking at the vision and the mission. And of course, we keep referring back to the 3 buckets to fill: planning for enrollment growth, meeting every student's needs, and building a community of respect and collaboration. And we expect those to be reflected in the budget as we're developing it. So the school committee policy for the budget and the budget process. The annual budget is the financial expression of the educational programs and the priorities of the school district. The budget then is more than just a financial instrument and requires cooperation on the parts of the school committee, the administrative staff, and the community to ensure sound fiscal practices for achieving the educational goals and objectives of the school district. So there are 3 facets to the school budget: the operating budget, the capital budget, and grant funding. So what does each of those entail? The operating budget, the school funding is made up of 2 components: salary and expenses. Capital budget, these are asset requests of $25,000 or more. And grant funding is really entitlement and competitive money that then is used to augment the operating budget. So looking at the operating budget, in September is really the launch. So me, the Assistant Superintendent of Finance, puts together the budget calendar for the school district. In September and October, the building principals and directors begin to evaluate their needs for the next fiscal year, and the capital budget is established. And it's important to note that while school just opened and the students just entered, a week ago, they're building a budget for students that will enter next September. So it's a long way away. It's a very long process. Presentations in November through January. Each building principal and director will make a presentation to the school committee, and I will also present the capital budget to the school committee. In January, the school committee holds a budget hearing, and then the budget is then voted and submitted to the town. So the budget calendar, in September, the town manager works with the select board, the school committee, appropriations committee to establish a budget message. And the budget message is based on the town's financial projections. So the beginning of this meeting just happened this past Tuesday at the select board. That was the beginning of coming up with this budget message. The boards will then set forth a date by which the approved school budget must be handed over to the select board. The school committee votes on the budget timeline that the schools will follow. So you can see the draft budget timeline for FY '26 is part of this slide. That's what we are working towards. Budget advisory group meetings. So throughout the budget season, starting in September, running through annual town meeting in May, Weekly meetings are set up that include the following participants: the town manager, the town CFO, a member of the select board, a member of the school committee, a member of appropriations, the superintendent, assistant superintendent for finance and operations, and a member of CIC, which is Capital Improvement Committee. So the roles of the principal and directors. The building principals and directors throughout the district begin to build their budgets. They'll begin with a zero-based budget, which means the budget is built from the ground up with students at the center of the work. Some of the factors that influence these decisions are the school improvement plans, which you heard some tonight and some at the previous meeting, the district strategic plan, student enrollment numbers and student-generated scheduling, class size guidelines and caseload sizes, data-driven decisions such as test scores, progress monitoring data, individual student needs, including IEPs, curriculum, instruction, and assessment needs, social, behavior, and emotional needs, changes in demographics, new compliance requirements, and physical plant needs. So typically what you will see every year is the budget is really 80% salary and 20% expense. It's really a people-driven budget. So the administrators will present their budgets to the school committee. In November, you'll hear from special education, technology, facilities, central office, curriculum, and instruction. And in December, Hopkins, Elmwood, Marathon, high school, middle school, and athletics. Then the consolidated budget is presented to the school committee in December, also with a joint boards meeting. Again in December and January at regular school committee meetings, in January for a public hearing, and in January for the school committee vote. So this budget will be presented to the school committee several times. So the building principals and directors through the district will meet individually with the superintendent and assistant superintendent for finance and operations. And the message always is the money is finite. In these small meetings, the building principal and director will present their budget, zero-based budget. Using input from these budget meetings, choices are discussed to determine the appropriate allocation of resources across the district to recommend a budget that meets the needs of the educational priorities. Some asks are placed on a back burner. Other asks that demonstrate need are put forth to the school committee. The next slide shows the asks that were not put forward. And the HPS, again, does a lot with a little, and you saw the presentation of our per pupil expenditure from Dr. Kavanaugh's update in the beginning of this meeting. And we are among the lowest in the Commonwealth. So an example of some of the requests that were brought forward but did not come all the way through in the budget, in the last budget, were new copier leases, software and projectors, art room tables. One of the custodians, there were two requested and one was reduced. A family engagement liaison, a science and technology director, a technician, and a system administrator. So as you can see, these discussions that happen with each director and building principal, some of these get teased out. So moving into the revolving accounts. So the revolving funds separately account for specific revenues and earmarks them for expenditure by a board or officer without appropriation for particular purposes to support that activity, program, or service that generated the revenue. Typically, revolving funds are authorized by state law for program or services with expenses that fluctuate with demand and can be matched with fees, charges, or other revenue collected during the year. So again, looking at our revolving accounts, we utilize the parking revolving, building use, bus revolving, preschool, athletics, international tuition, and circuit breaker to offset our operating budget in the amount for FY25 of $2,696,000. Looking again at the forecast of where the utilization can hold. Again, the one that needs to be looked at in FY '26 is the international tuition. The rest, keeping an eye on revenue that is generated each year, can hold mostly until fiscal year '30. We don't want to overutilize a revolving account that then creates a fiscal issue in the next budget year. So this is really an appropriate use to make that funding last. So budget changes over time. Looking at 2021, the student enrollment was 3,962 with a $51 million operating budget. In 2022, student enrollment was at 4,069 with an operating budget of $53 million. In 2023, student enrollment is 4,206 with an operating budget of $55 million. And student enrollment in '24 was 4,237 with an operating budget of $63 million. So moving into capital. So capital planning, state and local governments should prepare and adopt a comprehensive, fiscally sustainable, and multi-year capital plan to ensure effective management of capital assets. A prudent multi-year capital plan identifies and prioritizes expected needs based on a strategic plan, establishes project scope and cost, details estimated amounts of funding from various sources, and projects future operating and maintenance costs. Capital facilities and infrastructure are important legacies that serve current and future generations. It's extremely difficult for governments to address the current and long-term needs of their citizens without a sound multi-year capital plan that clearly identifies capital needs, funding options, and operating budget impacts. And this statement on capital planning comes from the Government Finance Officers Association. Looking at the town of Hopkinton, the financial management policies excerpts on their capital program policies. It says the town has made a practice of funding the operating budget at the expense of capital items, resulting in a backlog of pending capital requirements and deferred maintenance, which could ultimately lead to critical failures and increased costs. The town should strive to ensure that capital items are not funded through operating budgets and should seek to ensure that capital items are properly funded even in times of financial constraint in order to prevent larger costs and losses later. And second, the Capital Improvement Committee and the town manager will continue to maintain a rolling 5-year list of anticipated capital needs. The list should be reviewed and updated annually. So what governs capital budgeting? So capital projects are to build, replace, or improve facilities, grounds, mechanical, and technological infrastructure that exceeds $25,000. The town has a process for requesting a capital item or capital improvements that applies to all capital requests. The school committee will approve the capital plan in October. The Capital Improvement Committee reviews each capital request and presents its recommendation to the town manager by December 31st. The process requires that all capital requests go through the town manager, and the town strives to finance major capital items such as major construction projects or significant renovations with debt exclusions. So what drives the capital planning for the school districts? Facilities, keep in mind there are 5 buildings over 120 acres. So in order to maintain the facilities and all the infrastructure, one example are the HVAC replacements. Enrollment, 4,200 plus students, ages 3 to 22. And to accommodate our rapid enrollment growth, physical plant space is direly needed. And you can see that with some of our stick-built additions, the modular additions, and the new construction that has been requested. And enhancements, evolution of programs. Programs often need enhancements to meet student needs or keep the district current and competitive. One is the adaptive playground, where the location has been selected for marathon, and technology upgrades, which is almost an annual request.
Susan,
Yes.
what's a stick-built addition?
So it's different than a modular. So a modular is a box that is
Right.
brought and just attached onto the building. Stick-built is where you're taking the 2x4s and the steel and building it
You're
yourself.
actually building something.
You're actually building it.
Okay.
Yes.
Stick-built kind of sounds like, you know, putting together bamboo or, yeah.
Yeah. It just to differentiate
That's my
between
choice in
dropping
building
the
a home.
box, the plug and play.
Tell you more than you want to know about.
So, and again, this is a slide that has been shown many times over the years, and we're looking at our enrollment, and we're using the Dr. Arthur Wagman enrollment projections, but also looking at the capacity within the schools. And this is what has driven both the Elmwood and the Hopkins changes to try to alleviate capacity upstream. And then moving into grant funding, the grant categories, there's state or federal, and then there are private. Public funding sources, Every Student Succeeds Act, which is title grants and IDEA. Targeted funding are the DESI grants and state earmarks. Entitlement, these are awarded on the basis of a formula set forth in laws and regulations. We are entitled to receive these based on our enrollment and demographics, and we must comply with programmatic requirements. Competitive are awarded on the basis of eligibility following an application. We receive these funds based on the review of a grant reading team. Federal entitlement grants specific to special education, IDEA, Individuals with Disability Education Act, Federal Special Education Entitlement Grant. These funds are to ensure that eligible students with disabilities receive a free and appropriate education, FAPE, in the least restrictive environment. And early childhood special education grant. These are funds eligible to 3, 4, and 5-year-old children with disabilities receive FAPE that includes special education and related services designed to meet their individual needs in the least restrictive environment. So for the federal title grants, there are 22 federal. There are 9 that are grouped under 9 titles, 4 of which HPS is eligible. The title grants, Title I, improving basic programs operated by local school districts. Title II, supporting effective instruction. Title III, language instruction for English learners and immigrant students. And Title IV, student support and academic enrichment. The federal entitlement grant process, the grantor, the state, announces the award. The district prepares and submits the application for grant fund use. Applications are reviewed and sent back and approved. Those grants are then voted and accepted by the school committee, and then the grant is administered. Competitive grants then are written, it's a grant that's available through an RFP, and the district will respond to the RFP with an application. These applications are then reviewed by a grant reading team, and award recipients are announced. If we are to get an award such as this, again, the school committee would vote to accept the funds, and then the grants are administered.
What's an RFP?
Request for,
Proposals.
yeah.
I spend my whole day doing.
So as we look at the grants that we've been eligible for FY '24 and '25, so the early childhood special education program is around 24,000 from '24. It rose to 25,000 for fiscal year '25. Individuals with disabilities, the IDEA, was 970,000 in '24, risen to 977,000 for '25. Title I was 91,000, it is 107,000 in '25. Title II, 45,000 and 46,000, not a big change there. Title III actually went from 42,000 down to 35,000 for 25. Title IV stayed level at 10,000. And we do not know of any earmarks this early in the year.
Can I ask a question? The IDEA funding went up only a small amount relative to, can you, insight on why it didn't go up more than that, given our enrollment and?
I don't know the answer to that.
I'm just thinking it actually is sort of like getting a cut since what we bought in FY '24 for $970,000
Right,
is
right,
a different, you can't buy as much
yeah.
now as you could. yeah.
That is true. It's a good question, though. So again, as I said, we're beginning now for the children that are going to walk in the door a year from now. So these are the things that become the challenge of creating a budget. And again, it's a long process.
What's circuit breaker?
So circuit breaker is funding that is given to you based on, there is a threshold of spending for a student with disabilities, and the state will reimburse 75% over that threshold. And that's what circuit breaker is. So it's supposed to help level out students that may have very costly needs.
Got it. And international tuition, kid from Spain wants to go to Hopkins High School, it costs 20 grand, 10 grand, whatever, that's what that is.
Correct.
Yeah.
They don't come for the full 4 years, they come for 1 year.
1 year.
Yeah, right. What does it cost?
So we charge them the per pupil expenditure with,
16 and whatever.
with an inflation, yes.
Got it, okay.
How many, just occurring to me now, so if you don't know the number, that's fine, but how many international students do we have this year, roughly?
So years ago, the number was well in the high 20s, and we've reduced it now down to 10.
Because of capacity?
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, these kids live with billets in town, or is this a program where they apply through the school and?
Yeah, so part of the difficulty is finding sponsors for the students to live.
Yeah.
So that has been a difficult piece of it as well as capacity, so, yeah.
Got it.
There will be calls for people interested every now and then on various town pages.
Yeah. It's hard to find billets.
Yes. It's a big responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, we sometimes have to bill at 25, 30 kids in our hockey program, and
Yeah.
it's hard. Okay.
Were you in the service?
No.
It's the only place I've ever heard the word billet used.
Oh.
It was like service.
So, question just back towards the beginning, you don't have to move, but the presentation talking about the capital budget that we approve in October. When will we first see that?
Maybe the next meeting?
Okay. Not to put you on the spot, I just am thinking, oh my gosh, it's almost October.
Yeah.
Yes.
That beginning of the year flies through.
We have been working on the capital budget since July with Mr. Person, trying to work through. One of the things that we are trying to strategize, similar to what we heard from the select board, is really trying to look at our capital requests in terms of what needs to be done, but what could also be accomplished only as a pay-go as opposed to a debt. So, just looking at strategies around that.
That's great, I appreciate that. I don't remember you doing a presentation exactly quite like this before. This is really, I think, good even for people who follow every year. Any other questions?
I'm good.
Okay. Then moves us into that Hopkins School gift account.
Okay, this is a very easy one. The Hopkins School, you know, does a talent show, and they have revenues in the amount of $318.79, and they would like you to accept that, and it will go into the Hopkins gift account.
Fabulous.
Wow, yes.
Somebody like-
Make a motion to accept the $318.79 for the Edward Hopkins gift account.
Motion by Chris, is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Jamie, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And it's unanimous and so approved. Item H, which is the school committee goals, I actually am going to propose that we put those off until the next meeting because I had not realized until earlier today that I did not make sure that was included in the packet last year's goals, which helps us build off of, it would make a much faster process, I think, for people to have that background. Okay. So then, I see no old business listed. That moves us actually into items by consensus.
Okay, as superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
I move to approve the items by consensus.
I second.
Jamie, second by Susan. All those in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous and so passes. And then I would seek a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Susan, second by Chris. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. We are adjourned at 9:05. Our next meeting is scheduled for September 26th, a regular meeting here at HCAM. Thank you all, and have a good night.
And then 5:16, they're